Did you know there are some children's classic tales that are not just meant for children? They're also meant for adults. And many of these very famous classic novels that most of us have probably read at some point in our lives actually have much darker themes associated with them than just what appears on the surface. So today, I want to talk about some of those darker themes in some of these very famous classic books and encourage you to maybe go back and read a few of them with fresh adult eyes. I think you'll be very, very surprised. Hey there, it's Anna and Tucker, and we hope you're having a great day. So as I was saying, children's classic novels aren't necessarily just for children. Many of them have darker elements associated with them that may also appeal to adults. And I want to share some of those with you guys today. Most adults think that children's books are just for children, and that might be true for many books, but the classic books that I'm talking about today have kind of multiple layers of themes and elements to them that appeal to both children and adults. These books have deceptively simple language and relatable themes that resonate with readers of all ages. So I have a question for you. Have you ever watched an animated Disney movie and laughed at jokes that were clearly only there for the adults in the audience? If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll give you an example. If you've ever seen the movie Frozen, there is a scene where Elsa, the elder sister, tells her younger sister Anna, "You can't marry a man you just met." And usually that line gets laughs from everyone. Children think it's funny, but they don't quite understand why it's funny. That joke is meant for adults who know the realities of life, and so there's an additional layer of humor there associated. If you're not familiar with these dual layers of humor, I suggest going back and maybe watching a Disney film or two and looking for the adult layer of humor. I promise you, it's in there. There's a lot of hidden depth in these familiar tales that I'm about to discuss with you. They're surprisingly complex emotions and mature ideas that are hidden beneath the surface of seemingly innocent narratives. On the surface, you might think that children's tales should be happy, right? You might be surprised at how dark some of the themes of these seemingly happy classics actually are. These classics explore themes like loss, grief, social injustice that are often present but not explicitly stated. These authors were particularly brilliant at using the power of allegory and symbolism in children's literature, and it allows for multiple interpretations and layers of meaning. I've gone through my shelves that I have here at home, and I found 12 classic children's novels that each have hidden adult themes and dark elements that you might be surprised about. Almost all of these novels have been made into movies and television series many times, some of them very, very famous. But have you ever actually read the book where they came from? Because many times the books are much darker than any animated film or even live action film that's been put together over the years for these stories. And so if you go back and you read these books, you will see the stark difference sometimes between what Hollywood chooses to tell you the story is and what the author really said. The first book that I want to discuss is a pretty popular one to discuss that has darker themes, and that is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. The themes in Peter Pan are childhood, imagination, and the bittersweet nature of growing up. But let's talk about some of the darker elements in Peter Pan. Peter is not a role model. He prioritizes his own whims and desires above the well-being of others. He's selfish and controlling and devoted to his own entertainment, often using manipulation and control to keep Neverland intact, even resorting to death when needed. The Lost Boys aren't just lost children. They're a vulnerable group of boys that Peter manipulates and controls. Captain Hook is a symbol of death, the inevitable end of Peter's carefree existence. The crocodile is a symbol of the passage of time and the inevitability of death. There's a phrase used in the book called thinning the boys, and this phrase can be interpreted as Peter killing the lost boys who are growing up, as they are not allowed to grow old in Neverland. I don't know about you, but that's not exactly how I remember the Disney version of this movie, nor the musical that's on Broadway, or any of the other productions of Peter Pan. Quite different. Next, I have Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. The themes of Alice are childhood, adulthood, identity, and the nature of reality. But this is a pretty popular one to discuss the darker elements of. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was allegedly inspired by Carroll's real-life relationship with a real girl named Alice Liddell. Some biographers suggest that he had a deeper connection or interest in Alice, leading to interpretations of hidden messages. This interest in Alice was possibly unhealthy, if you know what I mean. There are multiple jokes about death. There's the personification of mental disorders. Alice's constant eating and drinking, only to then regret her constant eating and drinking, is a personification of eating disorders. The Mad Hatter, borderline personality disorder. The White Rabbit, generalized anxiety disorder. He does always appear very anxious. Lastly, some researchers have surmised that Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is a children's book critiquing British colonialism within the imperialist context. Pretty heavy for a children's story, I think. Next, let's talk about The Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Classic children's story, right? Almost all of us have seen the very popular Hollywood movie. There are, spin-offs of this that have been written. Wicked comes from the land of Oz. All kinds of things have come from The Wizard of Oz. But have you actually read this book? Because if you have, you know that this book is very, very, very different than the Judy Garland movie and any other movies that have been made about The Wizard of Oz. The themes presented in this book are the importance of home and belonging, the value of friendship, and the journey of self-discovery. All sounds very innocent and very appropriate for children, of course. But let's talk about some of the darker elements of this story. The wizard. He manipulates people by using tricks to appear powerful, ultimately offering Dorothy false hope and making her perform dangerous acts she might not otherwise perform without the manipulation. There's a lot of violence in this book. The Scarecrow and the Tin Man engage in violent acts, including breaking the necks of crows and massacring wolves. That didn't happen in the movie, did it? Abandonment. The group leaves the lion in a field because he's too big to carry. So they just leave him there, abandoning your friends. Sentient porcelain dolls. This piece was completely left out of most movie adaptations, and it's creepy. In the southern quadrant of Oz, there's a creepy place filled with sentient porcelain dolls, many of which are permanently damaged and scarred. And yes, it is exactly as creepy as you're picturing it in your mind right now. The Wicked Witch's green skin. Her skin may have roots in the fear of the unnatural and a sense of other. There's a difference in others. There's also some political allegory. Some interpretations speculate that the story is an allegory about the demonization of silver. Out of all the books on this list, I would say that the difference between the book and the film or TV adaptation is the greatest in The Wizard of Oz. It's quite different. So if you think you know the story, but you haven't read the book, you don't really know the story. Next, I want to talk about a few classic children's novels that are typically aimed at boys to read. Doesn't mean girls can't read them, of course, but Usually boys are the ones that are going to pick these ones up. And the copies of these books that I have are actually my dad's copies, so they're actually quite old. But the first one is Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. So the themes in Gulliver's Travels have to do with the nature of human society, the dangers of power, and the importance of perspective. Again, it all sounds very, very good for children to learn about, right? But let's talk about some of the darker themes of Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's Travels is a critique of war and brutality. It's satire on the destructive art of war, showcasing the absurdity of human conflict. The Houyhnhnms and the Yahoos. The Houyhnhnms are intelligent, horse-like creatures, and they're contrasted with the Yahoos, who represent human folly and bestial tendencies. Gulliver's degradation. As Gulliver's travels progress, he becomes increasingly despondent and disillusioned, highlighting the psychological toll of confronting human flaws. This book is also filled with sardonic humor. Dark humor is used to expose hypocrisy and absurdity in human society. Next, I have Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. Also another very popular one. Maybe not so popular these days, but definitely 30 or 40 years ago, super popular. The themes discussed in Robinson Crusoe have to do with survival, self-reliance, and the human capacity for both progress and moral decline. But some of the darker themes include having a colonial mindset. Crusoe's arrival is not a neutral event, but a conquest. He claims ownership of the land and views the resources as his to exploit, mirroring the colonial practices at the time that the book was written. Isolation and ownership. Crusoe begins to view the island as his personal domain. Cannibalism and prejudice. Yes, you heard that right. There is cannibalism in a children's book. The depiction of cannibals raises uncomfortable questions about cultural prejudice. Religious and moral considerations. Crusoe's faith plays a significant role in his survival and serves as a framework for justifying his actions and his beliefs. He uses fulfilling God's will as a justification for his colonial attitude. And it makes you think, is that a reasonable justification of colonialism? Next, we've got The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. Now again, this is a very popular, very much beloved Disney movie, the Disney take on this. And the themes in this book have to do with the law of the jungle, also known as a set of rules and customs that govern the jungle ecosystem and its inhabitants. I mean, on the surface, it's about a boy learning to survive in the jungle, and he makes some animal friends, right? But the book's also got some darker things going on. It's also about colonialism and imperialism. Mowgli's acceptance into the wolf pack and his eventual return to human society is a form of civilization. This book is really heavy on social hierarchy. There's a strict social order with different animal groups adhering to a law that dictates their roles and behaviors. Baloo teaches Mowgli the law of the jungle. The Bandarlog, portrayed as outcasts and uncivilized. There's also themes that deal with race and prejudice, which reflect Kipling's racial biases, possibly reflecting his views on the supposed inferiority of other races. For example, the monkey people. They're depicted as uncivilized and chaotic, while the wolf pack is depicted as disciplined and organized. This book also incorporates Kipling's personal experiences from his life. The character of Mowgli was inspired by homeless children Kipling met as a child in India, and contribute to themes of alienation, belonging, and the struggle to find one's place in the world. Next, we have another very popular one, Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, your classic pirate story. Everybody loves a good pirate story. The themes here have to do with coming of age, moral ambiguity, greed, adventure, and the conflict between savagery and civilization. And maybe we're not that surprised that a pirate story would also have some darker elements. I don't know. Maybe it's surprising. Who knows? But This book has a lot of violence and brutality. It's filled with violent scenes including fights, mutinies, and the brutal deaths of characters. There's greed and corruption. The pursuit of the treasure is driven by greed, and characters are easily corruptible. There's a lot of moral ambiguity. It explores the gray areas of right and wrong, showing that characters on both sides can act cruelly and selfishly with the proper motivation. It also has a lot of post-colonial themes. A lot of these last few books were all written in roughly the same time frame. It was pretty common for authors of that time period to use children's narratives to explain the author's particular opinions on colonialism. So here, the post-colonial themes have to do with the violence and exploitation that can result from colonialism. This novel also does a pretty good job of showcasing dated attitudes. It reflects some of the racist and sexist attitudes of the 19th century. A little bit about symbolism. The black spot is symbolic of death and condemnation. And Long John Silver, a very famous antagonist. Long John Silver represents darker aspects of human nature, including greed, betrayal, and the willingness to harm others for personal gain. And the last book in this subset of classic children's stories is The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Pyle. Now, this particular story, the story of Robin Hood, has been interpreted by many different authors. So this is specific to the Howard Pyle version. There are other versions out there, although the general story remains the same. The Adventures of Robin Hood depicts themes of social justice and the struggle against corruption and injustice. And we all know this classic tale, right? Steal from the rich to give to the poor. And generally speaking, the themes and the motivations behind these things are given to children as overall being good, right? Robin Hood is a hero. But heroism isn't all about good and bad. So some of the darker elements of Robin Hood include violence. Robin Hood kills to avenge his father, and later he kills a bounty hunter sent by the sheriff. The violence is often justified in the context of the story, which highlights the darker side of his heroic persona. There's lots of thievery and outlawry, right? That's like the bulk of this story. Taking from the rich to give to the poor is an act of defiance against the established legal system. And while it's presented as a noble cause, at the end of the day, it's still theft, and it still places them outside of the law. The Sheriff of Nottingham, the would-be antagonist of the story, but his actions are not entirely without justification. He is trying to maintain order, even though his methods are harsh and cruel, and he's driven by greed and a desire for power. The cost of heroism. Robin Hood's heroism comes at a cost. He's forced to live on the fringes of society. He's constantly facing danger and violence. He commits acts that are morally ambiguous and blurs the lines between hero and outlaw. The next classic is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Everyone loves The Secret Garden, right? This is actually a really old copy. This is my childhood copy from when I was a little girl. This story deals with themes of healing, growth, and the power of nature. But there are some darker elements as well. There's a lot of neglect and abandonment in this story. In particular, Mary Lennox. She's spoiled, she's neglected, and she's abandoned by her parents. There's Colin Craven, her younger cousin, who is confined to his room and left to the care of servants. And then there's Mr. Craven, Colin's dad, who's a bit of a mystery for a while in this story. He's so overcome with the grief over his wife's death that he retreats into himself and completely neglects his son. As you can imagine, there are overwhelming themes of grief and loss in this particular book. Much of the novel is not a very happy piece. Mr. Craven has an inability to move forward in his life, and Mary has to process the emotional scars of her past neglect and abandonment and isolation. There's also a lot of speculation that Munchausen syndrome by proxy is depicted in this novel, and If you haven't heard of what this syndrome is, it is basically the act of a caregiver purposely making someone that they care for, a child in this case, sick on purpose. And the reasoning behind it is, if I make you a little bit sick, you're going to need me. And so then I can worry about you. So I'm going to keep you sick because I need you to keep needing me. In the context of The Secret Garden, Colin's physical ailments are likely induced by his father's fear and overprotective nature. He's already lost his wife. He does not want to lose his son, and he doesn't want to put him in any danger whatsoever. And he doesn't care if it is actually making his son worse. I mean, that's pretty dark. As a parent, I can't imagine doing something like that. I really can't. Even in any sort of grief or loss that I might be processing and having a fear of losing my children, I could never imagine doing that to a child, let alone my own child. The next book I have is also one from my childhood. It is Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. And the themes in this book are extremely specific. It deals with the cruel treatment of animals and the importance of humane treatment. As you might be able to imagine, this novel is rife for having some darker elements attached to it. And so it does. It talks about cruel riding aids and practices. The bearing rein, docking, and spurring and whipping are all cruel tools or practices that are used on horses and are vividly depicted in this novel. The consequences of mistreatment, physical injuries, illness, and exhaustion, the loss of dignity, are all highlighted throughout this very short novel. And the impact and the legacy that Black Beauty had on the world at large when it came out. It was instrumental in raising awareness about animal cruelty, and it led to the abolition of the bearing rein and played a significant role in the growing animal welfare movement. All right, I've got two more books for you. The first is Pippi Longstocking by Astrid Lundgren. Did you know that Pippi Longstocking was actually a novel before it was a movie? Pippi Longstocking was a very popular movie that was made in the 80s. Or maybe early 90s, I can't remember. I was an adult before I realized that the movie was based on a classic children's novel. I had no idea that this came from a book. Pippi Longstocking deals with themes of childhood freedom and independence, and it challenges societal norms and authority. But again, there's some darker elements to this novel as well. The criticism of societal norms. The author attacks the petty rules and tyranny that adults too often use to restrain children's joy in life. The character, Pippi Longstocking, is no ordinary girl. She's always at the center of chaos and destruction. She's the disruptor of conventional life and appropriate behavior, and she refuses to conform to rules or expectations. She embraces her own unique perspective and is a symbol of creativity, imagination, and the strength to stand up to injustice. And the novel subtly critiques societal norms and expectations, particularly those that limit individual freedom and creativity. The last children's classic, with some darker themes associated with them, is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. And some of the things that I'm going to discuss here aren't just in Anne of Green Gables, but also may pertain to the rest of the series, Anne of Green Gables, as well. But the themes in Anne of Green Gables have to do with the power of imagination and its ability to overcome adversity and shape one's identity. But there's some darker themes and backstory to Anne of Green Gables you may not be familiar with. The author, L.M. Montgomery, struggled with mental illness, including depression. Her personal life was marked by challenges including her husband's illness and her difficult relationship with her son. So the book, or series, deals with loss and grief. Anne loses her parents, her adoptive father, and one of her best friends. Rejection. Anne faces rejection in her first attempts at writing, which mirrors Montgomery's own experience when trying to get her writing published, struggles with identity and expectations, and grapples with balancing her desire to be a writer with the societal expectations placed upon women at the time. An unrequited love and heartbreak. Anne experiences romantic disappointments and struggles with difficult relationships, which again probably mirrors Montgomery's own real-life experiences with her love life and her son. So now that you're familiar with some of the darker elements associated with many popular children's classics, I'm interested to know, which of these classics have you read? Which ones are you surprised about having darker themes? Were you not surprised at any of them? Had you heard some of these stories already about some of these books? I'd be really interested to know, so let me know in the comments down below. But just as a general wrap up, children's literature isn't merely for children's entertainment or entertainment at all. There's always a potential for children's classics to be used as tools for personal growth and self-discovery, even as adults. Many of these novels are really small, less than 300 pages, several less than 200. I mean, we're talking like real small here. Right? This is Peter Pan. I think it's like less than 300 pages. Yeah, it's like 200 pages. And so many of these books can be read in a weekend if you want, or even, a night if you just aren't doing anything. It's really easy these days to find beautifully illustrated versions of these stories. So this one, like The Wizard of Oz, has wonderful illustrations in here. I mean, even just the end papers alone. And so, it can help you maybe with the fancy of reading these children's classics, looking for the illustrated versions. I hope that I have encouraged you to go back and add maybe one or two of these children's classics to your reading list, the ones that speak to you the most, or the ones that you are really interested in knowing what the difference is between the story that's told through television and film and the original story as told by the author. I hope you approach them with an open mind and that you have a willingness to engage with the underlying complexities that are in all of these children's classic novels. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I actually had a lot of fun researching material for these because, again, all of these books came from my personal collection, and I've read many of them, but to be honest, I haven't read all of them. And the ones I did read, it's been a while since I read, and so it was very interesting to do some research on some of the darker elements and themes associated with each of these classics. Let me know if you like this video, if you want to see more of these types of things having to do with some different twists and angles of classics or, other types of books. Let me know if you're interested in that. I'd be happy to do another video pertaining to that if you'd like. If you liked this video, please feel free to subscribe to my channel. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye!